So welcome to episode 2 of Racing Stories, and thanks for watching the first episode. Obviously, I'd like to encourage you to like and subscribe on our YouTube channel to watch future episodes of Racing Stories. Today, I'm joined by Kim Bailey, Gold Cup winning trainer, Grand National winning trainer, and a good friend of ours. Kim, how are you? How's the summer going?
Yeah, good. We've had a good summer. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I'm as you know, I'm not the world's greatest fan of summer racing, so we haven't had very many to run. No, it's been good fun.
And have you managed to get away and enjoy yourself, relax a bit more?
My hobby is fishing, and I had 3 or 4 days with Nicky Henderson up on the Spey, and caught a fish, and my wife caught a fish, and Nicky caught a fish. So, yeah, we had a nice time up there. That's good.
Brilliant. You say you don't run many through the summer, so I guess it is a good opportunity for you to unwind a little bit. It's a very busy season, isn't it? The winter seems to get longer and longer.
The winter gets longer and longer, but actually it might sound incredibly stupid, but as the format of racing it is at the moment, with summer racing carrying on the whole way through, you actually can't go away very often because there's always horses here, and there's always something going on. So it has over the years changed. And now we've got this format. We've got 3 weeks with no racing at the moment, but the horses are in, so it might work very well for the jockeys to have a holiday, but it doesn't mean anybody else can have a holiday.
Do you think that break might be better at the end of the season? I always thought it kind of makes sense to have, like in football where you have a break straight after the last game of the season, and then
it's a difficult one because most people in my office will say I'm very old-fashioned if I come up with this thought again. But when we had a break at the end of June or the end of May for June and July, it did actually mean that you closed down, you went off and did what you wanted to go and do. You said goodbye to people and we'll see you again in August. And you get back at the new season and say, oh, what have you been doing since I last saw you? It's changed. You can't go back on the past. And the bookmakers are very happy that jump racing carries on during the summer. They'll probably make more money out of it than they probably own up to. But it is a difficult one. It's difficult for the race courses. Global warming, is that making a difference? I don't know, but to monitor the ground for summer racing is not an easy one.
So this series, Kim, I don't know if I mentioned it to a few people in the office, but we sat around this table a few years ago, and I've interviewed you many times over the years, and you said you've had this table quite a long time, and if this table could talk, it would have some stories. So I thought back then it might be quite interesting to do a series like this where we look into past and stories, in the modern day as well. But how long have you had this table for? Is that interest?
I've had this table for a long time. It was first in my house in Lambourn, and so we had many a lunch party around this table, or even dinner party around this table. And I said I was considerably younger those days, and we wouldn't have left it very early. It would have seen a lot of things happen. Certainly a lot of drunk out of it, and it's been good fun. And as I say, anything that in the past that you can talk to is the memories are there, aren't they? You don't harper on them, but they're there.
And so going back to those early memories, obviously Lambourn, you were based in Lambourn for the kind of early bulk of your successes, really. When did you actually arrive in Lambourn?
Probably before most people reading this or listening to this were born. I think it was 1990. We moved there in just before Christmas, and so Mr Frisk was trained out of won his Grand National in Lambourn, where he started the early part of his season in East Ilsley, where I was before. You got those days. I had Henry Daly working for me then. Look at him now. He was there at the time. It was good. Lambourn was a good place to be at the time. It was a nice place to go to.
What was it about Lambourn that attracted you to go there, do you think?
Well, it's a dramatically changed place now. So I always first ventured the idea of never ever thinking of training in Lambourn because what times I've been up on the gallops, I was horrified to see that everybody went round a grass gallop, and if you weren't the first person on the grass gallop by the time you went on, it was a pretty moderate occasion for your horse. But I went to Ireland to go and buy a horse of Michael Horrigan, who was then sort of one of the leading trainers in Ireland, a horse called Four Shares, and I was desperate to see it jump. And he erected a couple of straw bales in the middle of a ploughed field for this horse to jump, and I thought, my God, if that's how you can train horses to jump, and that's what training lamb was nothing. And I ended up going to buy some tack off Nick Vigors, and we had a few drinks after buying some tack. I actually didn't buy any tack in the end. I bought the yard instead. So, and that's how I ended up in Lambourn. It was an interesting time. I enjoyed my time in Lambourn, but there's a moment in life when things needed to move away from it, but we had great successes there.
And these successes came pretty early in Lambourn, as you mentioned. Mr Frisk started his training career in East Ilsley before and then went on to Lambourn. Talk a little bit about, we can't kind of ignore Mr Frisk. What a great horse he was.
I think you're only as good as a horse you've got to train. I was very, very lucky that at that stage I was able to pick up a horse that probably no one else wanted in Mr Frisk, and he was a pointer from Yorkshire. He had a quirky character. He's by Bivouac, which was a sire that no one ever wanted to touch at that stage because they're all bonkers, and he was a live wire in every sense of the word, and he was difficult to train. And my wife at the time, she used to ride him out with another horse and lead him. And I always remember when we first got him the first weekend, we sort of got him back into full work. Jimmy Fitzgerald was a trainer I hugely admired. He used to come and stay with us, and he was down for a Newbury flat race meeting, and we went up on the gallops, on Peter Cundall's gallops, to watch this horse work. And we worked 3 horses, and Mr Frisk finished probably 150 yards behind the other 2.
Really?
And I always remember Jimmy Fitzgerald saying, "So what is that?" And I said to him at the time, I said, "Well, this is a horse I bought at Doncaster Sales, in May." He said, "What are you going to do with it?" So I said, "Well, it's going to run at Exeter in about 3 weeks' time." He said, "I wouldn't if I were you. It'll embarrass you. It'll finish so far behind." Mrs Duffy, who I'd sold him to, she was coming over to watch him run. And I said to her in the paddock beforehand, I said, "I think I probably wasted your money. This horse is incredibly slow, but he does jump. I'm not sure he's going to be what you want." Anyway, it just shows how much I knew and how much everybody else knew, because the horse won by 18 lengths hard held, and went on to win 7 races that season. But he is a horse that had to have very fast ground, and he had his conditions. And of course, in those days, we didn't really water race courses like we do now. So, once the movement of watering race courses to give good ground would have been the end of his career before he even started. So he was very lucky.
Up until Mr Frisk, did you have horses in the yard that you felt could hit that kind of level, that running the big races? Where was that transition from kind of starting out as a trainer to having a serious?
I'd had winners at Aintree, and I won the novice hurdle at Aintree my second season training. So, we'd had decent horses. We hadn't. I mean, winning the Grand National is what makes the difference in people's lives. We'd had good horses at the time. I started with half a dozen horses. And gradually moved away from, we outgrew East Hills. He only had 28 stables, 30 stables, so we moved out of there and went to Lambourn. And Mr Frisk was obviously at that stage was the horse that put my name in lights of other people.
Yeah.
We had Docton's Express and King's Fountain and lots of other horses, a good horse at the time. So, he was the one who headlined it to a certain extent.
I remember you saying to me a while ago that when you win the Grand National, your life changes and everyone suddenly knows who you are.
Yeah, no, the Grand National is a really weird one, really. I remember Toby Boulding ringing me up and saying, "Well done," etc. He said, "But look, just warn you, anybody who moves their horses to you because you won the Grand National won't be with you in 12 months' time. They're floating voters and they won't survive, or you won't survive with them." And he was absolutely right. But those are the days when I had a fax machine or a fax line in my office, and I hadn't got a fax machine, and I actually went into Newbury to go and get a fax. I could hear this thing bleeping away and nothing happening. So I went into the old BT shop, those shops that British Telecom used to have, and I went in there and I ended up talking to the salesman. I said, "Can I buy a fax machine?" "Oh," he said, "No, you can't have one of those, sir." He said, "These are only for show. You can have it in 6 weeks' time like everybody else." And I handed my card and said, "Look, when you get one in, can you let me know?" And he said, "Oh, you're the chap who won the Grand National on Saturday." So I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I'll sort it." And then one came back on a motorbike from London and it was installed the following morning. So, there's a little bit of glory about it.
And I guess you are always known as a Grand National winning trainer from that moment onwards. And, did you appreciate that at the time? Do you think the scale of how long that would last, and how even today, every time you're interviewed, probably no one can interview that mentioning Mr Frisk?
I think not. It was a big race, obviously a big race in those days, but bizarrely not as big as it is now. I mean, it was a time when the racecourse was struggling to survive. It had various owners. The prize money was, I think, £75,000 they added to the winner. Now it's $1 million. Yeah. It is the one race that everyone's heard of. Yes, I didn't expect it to stick like it has done. Tell me, I'm not complaining.
No, absolutely, and it looks like you'll always hold on to that record time as well.
Well, that'll never change, because they very kindly changed the racecourse And also, they'll never ever allow them to run on that ground again.
Yeah.
It promised you it was rock hard.
Really?
I walked the course that morning with a stick, and I couldn't even get my stick in. So it wouldn't have been allowed now. So there we are.
And that time at Lambourn obviously was really capped off when, famous 1995 double at Cheltenham. And obviously that must have been an incredible year for you, really. Do you feel that had as bigger impact, if not more of an impact, than winning the National?
I think in many respects, yes, because the Gold Cup has always been the pinnacle of everybody involved in national hunt racing. That's the race you want to win. That's the best race with the best horse, and the most competitive race it is. And yes, that's the answer to that. I was very lucky to have horses like them. I mean, Alderbrook and Master Oats were both horses who wanted bottomless ground, and they had bottomless ground. Mr Frisk wanted rock hard ground, he got his ground. So a lot of luck plays into all the things. Neither of those two horses had been good water ground would have competed at all. So there we are.
It's incredible, really. It's incredible how sometimes fate does.
Fate plays a major factor in life. I mean, I'm sorry, you make your own luck. You work for what you want to go and get. But
absolutely, yeah.
a door can open and close, and you've got to grab it when you can.
You're only a phone call away, aren't you, from something kind of pretty massive happening, and that was your case.
It is. I mean, I always remember going back to Mr Frisk again. I mean, when I only had 9 or 10 horses in the yard, and Mrs Duffy rang me up. And I didn't have a full-time secretary, and I had just invested in what was a portable phone. I used to ride out with that portable phone. I mean, really bizarre. And it used to sit on the side of my saddle. And she was the one person who rang up. And if I hadn't answered that phone call that day, those horses wouldn't have come to me that she moved, and I wouldn't end up with Mr Frisk. So it's a little bit of luck, really.
Yeah, that's incredible. And Master Oats wasn't the easiest horse to train, was he? Did he have a slightly different routine to other horses in the yard?
He did. I mean, he broke a blood vessel. He was a strange one because when he won his novice chase at Southwell, Marcus Armitage rode him, and he just said to me after, he said, "This is your training moment of your career because this horse will never win a race again." He did. He progressed as he got older, and there was a bit of a difficult moment when Mrs Henchy, who owned him, decided to sell him. Not that I knew about it.
Really?
And I went to Ascot races, and David Murray Smith came up to me and said, "Oh, I've just bought your horse." And I thought, well, that's a bit strange. Sure, he's out in the field just down the road. Anyway, so I rang up Mrs Henchy and offered a little bit more money, and then I advertised him for sale. So, and that's when Paul Matthews got involved.
Wow, what a time to get forward in a horse and go on to win a Gold Cup. It's a bit of a dream, isn't it? What did you do differently with him at home to ensure?
Well, he broke a blood vessel at Utoxeter, and then he filled a bucket. He nearly died.
Really?
All the years I've been training, I've never seen a horse break a blood vessel as badly as that.
Wow.
We just stopped with him and gave him a year off. So when we came back, we worked him slightly differently. I had a very good assistant at the time called Eddie Hales, and we came up with this idea of not stressing a horse. And so we had him out twice a day, as did Alderbrook for different reasons. And we just only did 2-3 furlongs with him every single day. We never actually worked him. And it worked for him. And we've tried it several times since, and I can't guarantee it's worked since. But anyway, it worked for those two.
Did you feel that day when you won the Gold Cup that you had him there in absolute tip-top form?
Well, he had a phenomenal season. He'd gone from a lowly rated horse to a top rated horse in a very short space of time. And again, he had his conditions. He had a jockey on top of him who knew him very, very well. And if you're bored enough to watch the race again, you can see down the far side with the circuit to go, he probably wasn't going to win until Norman got slightly annoyed with him and gave him a couple of backhanders and brought him out on the outside, and then he just took off. He was a very talented individual. If he had been a human being, he would have been someone who would certainly be on the front row of anything that was going to be difficult in life.
Brilliant. So after all of that, and a great success at Cheltenham, you had a difficult time in your career where you moved to Northamptonshire. How tough was that time for you? Because it did really get to a point where you had.
It was a very difficult time in life, I got divorced. No one. That is not something anybody wants to go through. I felt we needed to get away from Lambourn for lots of reasons. I invested very heavily in a place in Northamptonshire, and it was a disaster. And there were lots of things that went wrong, and it was a difficult time indeed. And then I made the decision, and the hardest decision for anybody is when they decide to admit it's failed. And you've invested an awful lot in it, and time and money, and it was something I was proud of when I first started, but not by the time I finished. And someone came along and very kindly bought it off me, and I was very relieved. So we ended up here slightly by mistake, but it's, again, one door closes, another one opens, and a little bit of fate comes along. It's been the best thing that's ever happened to me, really. It's a great place to train. We've been here 17 years now. So.
Well, it's quite incredible how almost as quickly as we're saying, fate and luck can do you a favour sometimes. Also, a couple of unlucky things can happen, and very quickly you're backpedaling, aren't you? So to pick yourself up from somewhere like that, to then get to where you are current day is quite a remarkable journey, isn't it?
Well, you're only here once, and life is not a dress rehearsal. You've got to enjoy it. I love doing what I'm doing, and I've never lost enthusiasm for it. Plenty of my friends trying to persuade me not to carry on, but I needed to prove, and I wanted to prove that I was still capable of doing it. I knew I could. We moved here with 25 horses, and it was not going to be easy. My owners have been incredibly loyal with me. I've still got owners now who've been with me since I started. They, like me, have got much older, but they've been incredibly loyal to me, and they've seen the good, bad, and the indifferent, and the good again. So it's been good. I look back upon it and say it's been good fun. I don't remember the bad times in life. Preston Cates was a disaster, but I still look upon it as a fun part of my life because, I had a new life start. I remarried, and we had a son born up there who's Archie, who's now 19, so there's always, I got a lot of friends up there as well, and so. You decompartmentalize your brain, I think, probably, so that one on that side is switched onto the good side rather than the bad side.
I think also you do genuinely learn more sometimes from things that don't go right, and it makes you probably a stronger and a more equipped person going forward.
Well, I don't think you should make the same mistake twice.
No, exactly.
I made that mistake, and it's not one I make again. Come on, we all have times in life when things don't go according to plan, and that was a difficult one for everybody involved in my life at the time. Anyway,
we'll never have issues backing video up again because we've had one case where video footage wasn't backed up twice and a hard drive went corrupt on us, and again, you're never going to do that twice.
No, when I got married to Claire, we had the photographer managed to mess up his chips, and our photographs weren't quite what they should have been. I don't think he'll do it again either.
No. So we've talked about some of the great horses you've trained over the years, Master Oats being one of them. But quite often I hear it mentioned that there's a Kim Bailey type. There's a type of horse that you look for. Is that true? Do you have like a certain type of horse that you look out for?
I think you naturally buy very similar horses. I like to see horses that have got a bit of scope about them. They've got to be a good walk on them. They've got to have a good head, and you sort of have that pattern really. I know a lot of people come here and will say they look great. I mean, I've had mornings here when I've looked at the horses and I think, my God, that's so and so, and they look so similar. You do. I think every trainer does who buys horses. They do. They have a particular stamp, and I'm sure you like girls with blonde hair or brown hair.
Well, be careful what I say. Yeah. Sorry.
It is. It's very easy to go in that direction.
Is that when you go to the sales? Do you have, something like a Gold Cup in mind? Of that's the dream. Would you go out there and look at a horse and say, I'd like to buy that to try and win a Triumph Hurdle, or
no.
is it usually the Gold Cup?
No,
I mean,
I've been, Aidan Murphy's been involved with me for a long time, buying horses, etc. And he and I will go off the sales, and I'll wander around, he'll wander around, then we'll meet up and see what we like. If 90% of the time I'm going to sales and buying on spec, so therefore I'm going to buy horses that I think I can find a direction for. There are two. If I got someone who wants to go and buy a specific horse, who wants to go and buy Pacific horse with a budget. You know, it does make life slightly easier because you cut out the ones you know you can't afford.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're buying, it's rather like walking into a sweet shop. You know, if you're going to a sweet shop and you're a candy fanatic, you're going to look at that every single row and say, my God, that's a lovely, you know, I really wouldn't mind having one of those. And you can easily do that. And I used to, honestly, when I was younger, I used to go bonkers when I used to go to sales. It really was walking the sweet shop, and I would go and buy the horses I like to go and buy, then work out how on earth I was going to sell them afterwards.
Yeah, so that is a tricky side of it, isn't it? When you take that risk into it, because anything can happen with horses. So you're buying them young and then having to find owners for them. Obviously, for you, a big part of that has been the syndication side of it, which has been a massive.
Well, syndication is only going to get bigger because at the end of it, having a horse in training now is becoming more and more expensive, and the prize money hasn't really gone. You know, I'm running for prize money probably what I did 25 years ago.
Yeah.
How much I would try to tell you it's got better, it hasn't. So if people are involved in racing and perhaps they had a whole horse, they now realise they probably can't, so they get into a share in a horse. And those syndicates really do work. You know, we've got 20-odd syndicates, 25 syndicates here, and you know, we've had people who never met before who go on holiday together. And we try as much as we possibly can to make it a social engagement as much as an involvement in having a horse. And people come into my office on a regular basis to have breakfast, have a wander around the yard, and it's a lifestyle change having a racehorse, and it should be an exciting moment in your life. And to a lot of people, it's been a dream come true. You know, I go back some years ago, and when I used to fish on the Tweed, and there was a lovely chap called Pud Murray, who was the gilly I used to go up and down the river with, and he was mad keen on racing, absolutely loved it. And you know, he'd sit there talking to me. He'd ring me on Saturdays when I wasn't fishing. And then one day we were sitting on the river, and he said, "Oh, well, I hope you don't mind, but my horse runs this afternoon at 4:30 at Catterick." And I said, "Well, look, well, we better watch it." You know, and I thought that, you know, he was taking the piss out of me, really.
Yeah.
And I walked to the bedding shop in Ladbrokes in Kelso, and I'd been there loads of times, and it was always empty. And then suddenly this place was full of all his friends. So I didn't bother to ask him I stupidly didn't ask him what the horse was. I just sort of took the whole thing in naturally. And it was a lot of noise, and the horse won. It was trained by Mark Johnson, and I looked down, it was Elite Racing. Well, I mean, he was one of 18,000 people who probably owned that horse, but it was his horse.
Yeah.
And for him, that moment was the best of all. And and that's where racing works, because he would have told everybody. That's why that betting shop was full of his friends who all come to see his horse run. His horse.
And that, if that as well, you know, to him, if he feels that he's the only person involved in that horse in a way, that's a real special feeling, isn't it? You know, and you can split that outlay amongst however many people you want.
Well, you've had horses in training, and you know, people don't reply to them and say, "Well, actually, I've got a 25th share in a horse with Kim Bailey." Do you say, "Well, I got a horse with Kim Bailey," don't you? You know, that's how it works.
Yeah. When Magila did win, I was the only one.
Yeah, you were the only one there.
So going back down memory lane a little bit, and to when you arrived here in Andoversford, a horse that really got you back on the map and back on those big days was Harry Topper. Explain to me when Harry Topper first ran. I think he first ran in a bumper.
Well, he was an oddball to start with. He never gave us the impression he was a racehorse. The Price family in Herefordshire were the reason I had him, because he was obviously very difficult to deal with, and they recommended that I would have the patience for him. Thankfully, they did. He never showed us a huge amount. He was a box walker. He cribbed by. He did everything that we didn't want to have. We put a sheep in with him, and I think the sheep didn't last very long. I had to apologise to the shepherd after that. I will take horses to Lambourn before they run as their last piece of work, and we didn't do that with him. The day he ran at Hereford, I rang up David Keat, who owned him, and I said that the chances are this horse will be coming home, because he hasn't really shown me an awful lot. And then when we decided to take him to races, we couldn't get on the horse box.
Really?
And he wouldn't go on the horse box. We hadn't really tried, and we finally gave up on that. And I took my four-wheel drive and with the trailer back and took all the petitions out, and we got him in the trailer and travelled him to the races. And And Charlie Green rode him, who you'd ridden him out every single day, and he hadn't had very many rides. Anyway, we ran in the bumper. Well, I mean, the horse absolutely bolted up. We were absolutely staggered. And then we had to get him back on the trailer and bring him home. And that took a bit of a while as well. He loved soft ground, and he was a revelation for us. He really was.
I remember him winning over fences for the first time at Exeter. And you start a lot of your nice young novices off at Exeter, don't you?
Well, I think Exeter is one of the true, proper, old-fashioned national hunt racecourses. It's a great place to take a chaser. It's a great place to take any horse racing, because if they're not good enough to win around there, you know, it's a proper racecourse.
Yeah.
And there are very few of them nowadays. I know you're taking on the likes of Paul Nicholls and co down there, but you know, it's a good racecourse to go to.
I think it was Rocky Creek that he beat that day, who ended up being a very good horse in his own right. And when is it that you kind of start to really dream with a horse like Harry Topper? You know, obviously he didn't show a lot at home. He surprised you in that bumper and could have well gone back home after that race and ended up, you know, going on to achieve what he did achieve.
I think you know, the one thing I've learned over the years is the fact that you'll sit there and you watch horses go up the gallops. The ones that fly up the gallops are the ones that are no bloody good usually, and the ones that that don't show a lot save it for the racecourse. And he certainly was one. And he, you know, rather like Master Oats, they were similar sort of horses. And we talk about First Flow as well, because it was the same ownership, but they were horses that would actually run through a brick wall for you, literally, because they were, without being rude, they were that stupid. And I don't mean that in any hardship for the horse, because they were wonderful creatures, but you know, they just literally had one thing to do. You know, they might do it slowly, but they would do it.
Yeah.
He, you know, he had his conditions through his career that suited him. You know, he won a Denman chase by some considerable distance.
25 lengths, I think it was.
No, he was a little gem for us, really.
And that really, you go from being in a period of time when the phone stops ringing, people maybe are not writing articles about you. The days of the Gold Cups and the Grand Nationals, everybody wants to write an article on every horse in the yard almost, don't they? And suddenly you hit that time. When Harry Topper came along, it must have been nice to finally, you have people wanting to know about these big races.
The weird thing about a sport, of any sport you're involved in, when you're having a bad patch, no one wants to talk to you. And you soon realise, actually, when you're really going well and you're having all these big winners, the phone rings on Sunday morning for the press to find out how the horse is, what are your plans, everything else. And when then suddenly the phone doesn't ring, you actually long it, you know, you pick it up to see if it's working.
Yeah.
Well, then days when you used to have those sort of phones. And so it was enjoyable, if you want to put it that word, that actually the press started taking an interest again. Bizarrely, they've all been very supportive to me, which has been great. So when the chance to start promoting the thing again and horses started winning, it was very good.
Do you think that you maybe in the earlier time in your career, when you know you got up to pretty fast success straight away, you appreciated it more the second time around?
I certainly, you know, having a win at Cheltenham this year was something I really appreciated, I think more so than any winner I've probably had at Cheltenham, and it's because we wanted him to win. We wanted him to win. We think he's a horse that we had every chance. The saddest part was the other horse not completing the course. But once I realised he was okay, I could actually sit back and enjoy the other horse winning his race. And the celebrations were probably, but that might, you know, I'm not a person who's going to keep going till 5 o'clock in the morning. But I certainly, you know, we enjoyed it enormously.
I mean, Cheltenham, there's no place like Cheltenham, is there? But one meeting and one race that I knew meant an awful lot to you is when First Flow won the Clarence House, Grade 1 at Ascot. Again, for Tony Solomons, who's been with you, you know, as an owner right from the very start. Is that right?
Tony, yes, he came to me my second season. He had a horse called Le Métier with me, who was a decent animal, and sadly he got injured and retired. But Tony's been with me. He's never had another jump train. He's had several flat trainers. We've always got on very well together, and we'd had one or two. To give you some sort of idea of what this person was like, I mean, we bought quite an expensive horse in France, and we turned him out, and we had a horrendous thunderstorm here, and this horse was turned out, and he panicked in the field. It came from nowhere, and we had torrential rain, and this horse galloped up to the gate and slipped into the gate and cartwheeled over it. and was fatally injured, and we had to put the poor horse down. And that horse Tony I bought him for him. The horse was knocked down to me. He hadn't seen the horse, he hadn't seen the bill, hadn't even got one. The horse wasn't insured. And it was King George Day at Ascot, and I knew where he'd be. And I tried to ring him in the morning after it happened, and he didn't have a mobile phone, or if he did, he wasn't going to use it. And his wife wasn't very well at the time. But I knew he was going to Ascot because he always went to Ascot. I knew exactly where I would find him. So I actually drove to Ascot that day, and I walked into the stand where I knew I'd find him. And he just said to me, "Oh God, how's my new horse?" And I said to him, "You're not going to believe this, but actually, it was unfortunately met an accident this morning." We sat there, and he just said, "I'm so sorry for it." So I said, "Oh no, I'm really sorry for you, because at the end of it, you bought an expensive horse, and you haven't seen the bill, and whatever." And he said, "Don't worry, Kim." He said, "I'll you go and replace him."
Really?
And I just thought that man was so special, and that's when I sold him a half share in Harry Topper.
Wow, really?
And that's how the Harry Topper bit started, really.
It's so that's incredible. Somebody who understands horses and racing to be able to accept something like that, because it's
very, very few people would do that.
Yeah.
It was my responsibility, and the horse was my responsibility because I'd bought the horse, and it was in my name. He could have easily walked away from it.
Yeah.
He is a man of great understanding. He was a very successful businessman, and a charming person to deal with. And I mean, for the years we've had, he's had a huge amount of success. And then when we retired, Harry Topper, he said, "Will you go and find me another one?" Yeah. And blow me, we found him First Flow.
So how did you come across First Flow?
Well, First Flow was an interesting one, really, because he was bought by Kerry Fanshawe, and Robert Fanshawe was a good mate of mine, as Kerry is as well. And they talked about this horse, but not only by the fact they talked about buying him. And they had him in training. Well, they lived just outside Lambourn, and he used to go up and work with Brendan Powell's horses. And they rang me up one day and said, "I think you ought to come and have a look at this." And I rang Brendan, and Brendan suggested, "I really do think you ought to come and have a look at this horse." So David Bass and I went over and took another horse with us. And I can't remember what name of the horse, whether it was any good or not, but so we decided to work it. And it was a bitterly, bitterly cold morning. John Perris was with me because I think it might have been his horse that we worked with him.
Yeah.
And we watched him work. David rode him, and David gave me the nod as he came off the gallop that we ought to try and buy him. So we then spent a little bit of time in the freezing cold negotiating, and the horse was bought. And then I rang up Tony Solomons and told him I bought him a horse, and he said, "I've looked at his pedigree, why on earth you bought this horse for me?" And I said, I have a gut feeling he'd be very good, and
And he was.
Mm-hmm.
He was a horse that you adored him really when he was in training, and I know he's very special to you. He was a bit of a one-off, wasn't he? He was
totally one-off. I mean, again, he was very like Harry Topper. He was they were very similar horses. They were quirky, very, very quirky. He had to do his own. You couldn't annoy him. He had to do everything the way he wanted to go and do it. He wasn't a natural jumper. We spent hours with Laura Collett trying to help him. We then found out we never thought he'd jump a fence because he was so clumsy. We schooled him over fences, and he demolished every single one. And we've got a set of tyres out there, one the last attached tyre. It was the only thing he jumped successfully. And we never schooled him over fence again after that. We schooled him over tyres the whole time.
Really? And that went through his whole career?
Mm-hmm.
Really, that's really interesting. So, because obviously watching him in a race, he would quite often bowl out in front, and he was such a good jumper on a race.
Well, there were a couple of races that he ran very well at Ascot, and he won a handicap at Ascot. And the saddest thing, that was all COVID year, because that was, to have a first grade one winner or Group 1 winner for a long time, etc., and to have it there and actually go and celebrate with a glass of water on my own, it was nearly not what I wanted to go and do. David Bass and he clicked. They're about as mad as each other, really, and it worked very, very well. And the handicap he won the race before. I mean, he took off so far coming to the last that if he hit the top of it, I think he'd have rolled past the winning post, let alone anything else. But Yeah, no, they were, you know, the Clarence House was a good race. The forms worked out of that race. It was extraordinary. He was an extraordinary horse.
He deserved his day in the sun like that, didn't he, to win a Grade One, because you know he was at that part where if he ran in a handicap, he'd carry lumps of weight, and he probably just came underneath the top
he was a horse
from
that
Ireland.
he carried weight in big handicaps and carried them. You know, he had a great record of race. He was just short of being really top class. And bizarrely, one of the best races he ran was in the Champion Chase, where he finished 6th. He'd only beaten 7 lengths by, and he'd run off the course twice during the race. He can't go left-handed, or he really struggled to go left-handed, and he hates underlying courses. You know, David Bassett in the Champion Chase was virtually pulling him up at one stage, yet he still managed to only get beat 6 lengths.
Yeah, and even in his last season, he ran well at Chepstow, didn't he?
Yeah, ran a blinder at Chepstow, and then I probably should have retired him straight after Lingfield, but I mean, it's very hard. I couldn't have handled that, but you know, it was the right race for him to go out on, yeah, he was an extraordinary creature. He's got a very good home now. Kaylee, who used to work for me, has him in Ireland, and she keeps me posted of how he's getting on, and I get these weird and wonderful videos of him doing things that he wouldn't have done before, but it's great.
Brilliant. It's a great end to the story with him. So back on to owners, you know, you must have trained for a massive amount of owners over the years, of a vast amount of people, characters. How is that, like, the hardest thing, would you say, about your job, is managing expectations, dealing with owners, especially in a syndicate? You just see a range of people all the time.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, you train for every. I mean, that's in many respects the beauty. That's why I love the job, because you do meet a complete cross section. You know, over the years I've trained for some particularly interesting people. You know, one person was a chap called Johnny Baker, who was involved in the syndicate, and they had a horse called Positive with me. You know, he was obviously won the Scottish Champion Hurdle, and they had a bronze done of him, and the bronze was stolen. Anyway, he did a bit of time in Her Majesty's services, and he used to ring me on reverse charges. That was quite entertaining. You know, we ran a horse. They wanted to run a horse in Baden-Baden. We took a horse to Baden-Baden. There's a story probably I couldn't tell on any form of recording, but it was a very interesting period. We ran this horse, and they just wanted to have a weekend away, and that's one of the things you don't really understand, that, you know, when you're first starting your training career, that actually these people are paying a lot of money, and they want, you know, they like to do something different. That was a particularly interesting weekend, but that was an awful long time ago. You know, everybody goes into racing for different reasons.
Yeah.
But you know, if you can stand on top of a hill and say, I've got a horse good enough to run at Cheltenham, that horse will be sold within 25 minutes. That's the power of that meeting. And long may it continue to a certain extent. It has become an animal with a very large big head, and there are moments when you begin to wonder whether it's the right thing for the racecourse, or the right thing for racing in the whole, that something should be that strong. It's an interesting time when you compare Cheltenham to Aintree. They're very different meetings. Yeah. In many respects, Aintree is more fun because it's not got the pressure of Cheltenham. Yeah. You know, when I go back to the early time of things like Cheltenham previews didn't exist.
No.
Now, you know, the whole build-up for Cheltenham is so huge.
There's festival previews everywhere, isn't it? And every city, town across the country as well. It's not just this area. Obviously, you know, we're incredibly close to it here. You probably would be the closest trainer to the racecourse, almost, would you?
Probably now, yes. But now that Jim Wilson's no longer training. But, you know, if you look at, you've got Ascot, you've got Epsom, but you don't seem to have Cheltenham, you know, Ascot previews. They might do one. They might have the odd one in London, but it is an animal, Cheltenham. It really is. And
that, you talking about pressure, say for example this year in the Ultimate, which you won, you had two horses that were both at the top of the market, and Trelawney falls at the first. So
we'll get into the second. That might be easier.
Is it the second? But it's, you know, you've then got two groups of owners to deal with. You've got to make sure both of your jockeys okay and the horse is okay, and So, I mean, it must be quite extreme pressure, especially when you've got to get them ready for the big days like that, when everybody's watching.
When you're a small stable like me, to have two horses running that you really fancy and have them in the same race is not actually the ideal situation. But having said that, the decisions were made. Everybody's involved in decisions, and you have to make that decision. The hardest probably decision was made by David Bass as to which one he'd ride.
Yeah.
And he made that decision very early on, and I think almost on the day of the race he might have changed his mind if he could have done, because conditions were probably more suitable for Toulon than it were for Chianti Classico. But Harry Cobbs is a very good substitute, and it didn't work. But who knows,
Great. So one thing, Kim, that I've picked up on, and I think a lot of people pick up on, is that all of your horses wear a big white sheepskin noseband. Why is that?
A silly one, really, because at the end of it, I had a runner at Worcester in Division 2, and there were 22 runners. Two things that don't happen anymore. You don't get that many divisions, and you don't get that many horses. And it was pretty well dark. It was about 4:45 in the middle of winter, and I couldn't see. There I was standing with my binoculars. I had a horse with dark colours. I couldn't really see. But there was one horse in the field which was trained by Ian Balding, with a sheepskin noseband. That was the only horse I saw. Right. And I thought, sod this, I want to see my horses. And in those days, we used to have divisions to novice hurdles with maximum runners in every single one. And they used to finish late. So, yeah, that's bizarrely how it's... But the only horse that didn't win Mr Frisk never ran a sheepskin noseband.
I was going to ask about that.
Nor did Docklands Express.
Yeah,
and I'm not really quite sure why, but anyway, they didn't. Everything else did.
Because I guess they use them, don't they, if a horse maybe has a high head carriage to kind of bring their line of sight down slightly. But I guess there's no disadvantage if they have their head in the right place anyway.
The odd occasion. It doesn't happen very often, and I don't run one in them now. It's sort of it's a signature tune, really, isn't it? I don't know, but it's easy to pick them out.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Purely just so that you can spot them.
Well, again, if I was to start from scratch, would I have sheepskin? There are a lot of things I would do differently if I was to start from tomorrow morning. Sheepskin nosebands are not really that important, but they've been part of my training career for a while, and and people pick my horses out because of it.
Yeah.
And there's still horses. Obviously, Evan Williams runs horses in sheepskin. Oliver Sherwood used to as well.
Donald McCain might do as well.
Donald McCain might do as well. Yeah. So there are still people who do it.
Brilliant. Well,
Paul Nichols used to run all his horses in sheepskin, and he stopped overnight.
Really? Really? When did you start running them in sheepskin nosebands?
When did I, or when did he?
When did you?
Well, that was my first season. So
straight away. Okay.
Within my, I think it's in. It might have been end of my first season or the early part of it. I always remember it was Worcester races, and it was absolutely pitch dark, and there was only one horse I could see amongst this 22 runner field packed. So
we're talking earlier about horses like Harry Topper and First Flow, and buying them young at the sales. One thing that I've always thought about you is that you're very patient with these horses, and the type of horse you buy requires patience, doesn't it? Have you seen that in this modern world where everybody wants everything yesterday? That's tricky.
It has changed dramatically. So if you go back to the days when I started buying all my horses from youngsters, and then you would be waiting 2 years. But you bought them as 4-year-olds, they're not 3-year-olds. So therefore they were a year ahead. This business of now buying 3-year-olds, which became fashionable once the French got very involved in our market, they suddenly started bringing everything forward for a year. That's probably made it harder, because 2 years later they're still only 5, and you feel they've been around for a long time. Whereas a 4-year-old, their chances are they will run at the back end of that season. It has changed dramatically. And if you go back to how you treat an Oats, if a person wants to get involved in racing and it's their big ambition, and they've got money to go and do it, and buying youngsters for them, it's a bit like them suddenly say, I want to buy a Rolls Royce, and when you go and pick your Rolls Royce up, the salesman says, well, look, I'm going to hang on to the car keys for 2 years before you can drive it. But I would always recommend that someone getting new into racing would get involved with the horse that's more or less ready to go and run, because at the end of it, by the time it's lovely seeing a young horse come through. I really love that part of it, but it's very difficult to receive bills on a regular basis when nothing's happening. And I think you want to be able to see a little bit of return for your money, one way or the other.
Do you think that's something that's changed a bit? Do you reckon owners maybe were more patient before, or
the type of owner is different? You had a lot more people who were involved, who perhaps involved with animals beforehand and understood the patience that were required with them. Now the sales companies have latched on quite quickly, and they are actually being very good at it. The point-to-point sales have become very, very important. These boutique sales have popped up everywhere. There's a sale during the winter every single month, if not even 2 or 3 times a month, where you can go and buy a horse. And again, that's going to move again in the future when you'll suddenly find online sales will have become more prevalent. So there'll be a case, and there'll be a time in the next 5 years, I think, when someone's got a really good point of a sale, and they will advertise and sell it online within a week, rather than wait for the sales or for someone to turn up and come and buy it.
So something I found really interesting, and you probably won't want me to mention this, but I went onto your LinkedIn profile yesterday, and it says on there that you've been training racehorses for, I think, 46 years and 8 months or something along those lines. So that's a long time. It's a very, very long career. And even now, you still seem to always be ahead of the curve. You seem to, your social media, your blog, website, that kind of side of Kim Bailey Racing for a long time now has been very important. How have you managed to always kind of stay ahead of the game?
A woman called Candida Rogers and I got together in 1996 and set up a website.
Yeah.
She was a person who lived in Norfolk and had a vision that websites would work. And we have an open day every year. You produce a brochure, and the brochure's out of date 2 days later. So that's how I got involved in a website then. It's very different to what it is now, but it was a front cover telling people what it was, and the horses were involved, etc., etc. And then when I was having a really bad time in Northamptonshire, I had to have something in my mind that put something into people's thoughts so they didn't forget me. And that's when I started my blog, and I would probably put some pretty outrageous things in there which might get picked up by the press, and then there'd be a little article somewhere, just because you really do need to have your name somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's carried on from there, and I enjoy doing it. I mean, I used to write a rather silly article for the Sporting Life, and I enjoy that side of it. I find it quite easy. My spelling's shocking, my grammar's even worse. My English is, they can tell when I write it when someone else does. But it's, it doesn't take very long. It's a 20-minute chore for me. It's not a chore.
And it's successful, I think, because it's there every single day, bar Sundays, isn't it? So
well, you can't. If you're going to do it, you have to do it every day. I mean, you really do. And if I'm going away, I will get someone to take it. My secretary hates doing it. My previous secretary hated doing it. Maya, who's my current PA, she won't do it because she said I can't do it. Matt's done. My assistant's done a few, and he does it. But he says I don't know how you do it every day. But it's actually picking up on something, but it's a really important part for me because at the end of it, it's kept me. We sold a lot of shares, our syndicates out of it, and I find it quite easy to do.
It's nice as well that quite often I'll go racing and talk to people, and this yard will come up in conversation, and straight away people are like, "Oh, I read Kim's blog every day." Having people just follow the yard, even from an interest perspective, it's a nice insight for them, and I think it's a nice thing to have, to know that when you go racing, people are maybe just supporters of the yard. They might not necessarily even be owners, but
the racing is. I love racing, as you know, and I love everything to do with it. And racing's had a reputation over the years of being a very closed shop, and I think it's really important. I put on there many years ago, you're only a phone call away, and I generally mean that. A phone call can get you involved. People now, before they go on holiday, will look at the hotel website to find out whether they go to a restaurant, they look at the website. So everything's now geared to a website. And I go onto other trainers' website, yes. And if you're going to invest heavily into something, you're going to look at the website to see whether it's something that's going to be that you get a feel for.
Yeah.
I don't like this business of a large gate at the end of the drive which you have to drive through. I'd like to have an open policy. And we tried to differently. We've got a camera at the top of the gallop. I think we're the only trainer who does it. So probably a bit of bullshit, but at the end of it, a number of people ring up and say, "Oh, there's deer on your gallop this morning," or whatever. I'd like to be very open with what we do, and I feel that anybody sends me an email and asks if they can come around, they will always get a yes.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic thing, and I think by doing that, many more yards are adopting that kind of approach as well. Which
Well, if you're running a business, that's what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Because at the end of it, if you in the old-fashioned days when people had stocks and shares, they didn't ring up their stockbroker and tell them what to go. Their stockbroker would ring them up and tell them and talk to them, and it's communication is obviously very important. But we're in a different world now to when I started, as I say, you rightly reminded me, I've done it for a long time, and things have moved. In the next few months, I shall be putting Matt, my assistant, on my license, and the next generation quietly comes through. But you've got to keep moving forward to keep abreast of the times. I love what I do, and I have to say that if I have. If I don't have, you have a reason to get out of bed, and that's really important.
Well, I was going to say to you about that, about motivation, and what keeps you motivated to do this every day. You love racing, but what is it about racing that keeps you hooked?
I think that the word I did. We've all had times in our life when we haven't been very well away. I did 3 weeks in hospital last year, and my God, that was a wake-up call for me, because at the end of it, I couldn't do what I wanted to go and do, and you suddenly realise actually how damn lucky you are to go and do what you want to do. I get paid for something that I do as a hobby. I love this job, and I love everything to do with it. There are times it drives me around the bend with all the problems that create itself, with prize money and the way racing's run and everything else, but that's a different ballgame and a completely different story. But as a sport, there's some really good people involved in it, some fantastic people get involved in it, and you're incredibly lucky to be involved in what is one of the top national sports in the country.
Yeah.
And the fact that I can sit around this dining room table for breakfast, and we can entertain people who've never been in a racing yard again, but they will know more about my horses than I do. They will reel off the horses, like you do, reel off the horses that you've been involved in, horses that are currently in the yard.
Yeah.
You forget how much people actually really love reading, seeing, talking about horses.
Yeah.
Matt, my sister's big into his football. People come and talk to him about football. I know nothing about football. I talk about cricket.
Yeah.
But we all have a passion. And when you have a passion for sport, you have a way of starting an argument and a discussion, because everybody has an opinion.
Yeah.
Those opinions are important.
With racing, it happens every day. That's the thing. The thing I love about racing is it's always there. Bar Christmas Day maybe, which I'm looking forward to Boxing Day at that point, but it's always there, and you've always got something to research, you've always got something to watch, you've always got something to have an opinion on, to make a conversation about.
Again, I think take that one stage further. I mean, where we are now, that racing is on television every single day, terrestrial television or on a Sky channel. You can watch it. And all the TV channels are all saying, oh, we haven't got the audience we had last year or whatever. But if you pick that thing up there and you click on there, you can watch any sport around the world.
Yeah.
So racing's actually fighting for a very small or a large pool, trying to fight for those people to turn up. So, and as you get older, people, do they watch on television or they actually go to the races? So you've got to have a really good reason to go to the races when you can actually watch it at home in the comfort. So therefore, race courses have really got to pull themselves together, I think, to make sure they encourage people to come racing.
Yeah, I think as a spectator sport, the closer you get to racing, nothing quite beats for me kind of standing opposite a fence and watching horses.
No, I mean, I used to say to anybody, if you want to get involved in racing, go to Fontwell.
Yeah.
Go and stand in the middle of the course. You can literally walk 10 yards and you'll see them going down a fence and up a fence. You're there. You can get the noise, the feel, the speed, the shock, everything else that goes with it, and you'll be bitten from that moment on.
Yeah, I agree. This is the first racing yard I ever came to, and thankfully to you for giving us that chance. And we've gone on and worked at loads of racing yards and race courses all over the country, and it is a dream come true to do that. But it is a more accessible sport, I think, than a lot of people imagine, and you can get very close to it, and you can go to your local race course, even your local point to point, and you can get that buzz. And I would encourage anyone to go and do that.
Well, of course, I'm going to encourage them, because at the end of it, that's part of the job. But if you have a really good friend who's involved into a sport and they say, come on, let's go and have a day's pointing, and you've never been pointing before. Look, if you're going with somebody else, you've got an instant moment where you're going to enjoy. I used to get very involved in motor racing. I had a cousin who was a Formula One driver, and I used to love it. I used to get really involved in it. that although I still watch it now, that the involvement's gone. So if you're someone who perhaps has come here for breakfast or whatever, and you go to the races and you see you've got a runner, or you've got you go racing with a friend, they've got a runner, you then follow it much closer than what you would do and that's the same with all sport. I love my cricket. I get very involved in cricket. I used to play. I have a son who's now a contract player for Gloucestershire. I watch his progress, and if his progress goes in the right direction, that'll give me a huge amount of entertainment in years to come.
Brilliant. And talking about years to come and the future of the yard here, you mentioned Matt, who has been with you a long time, isn't he, Matt? When did Matt actually start working with you?
Well, interesting. Matt was started working with Nigel Twiston-Davies, and then went to work for Tom George, and he left Tom George to go and work for Carl Llewellyn when he was training in Lambourn, and Jason Maguire was riding out here at the time, and he brought Matt along to ride out. Now Matt doesn't ride out, because you can see why when you see the difference. And Matt used to come along, and we got on well from day one. And I said to him, "Well, you'll hate Lambourn. You'll absolutely hate Lambourn. And when you do, give me a ring and come and work for me." And that phone call came 6 months later.
Really.
And so he's been with me ever since. And very much a part of the cog that Thorndale works around.
Yeah.
And it's made my life much easier the more involved he's got, and it's only fair that he should be given the opportunity. And I look, so he, I gave him a part of the business some years ago, and we've had a fixed figure in our head as to when and when that's going to happen to turn around, whereupon his name will come on my license, and we're getting quite close to that now.
Yeah.
So it'll happen in the next 3 or 4 months.
Wow, interesting. Obviously Matt, to your owners and everybody, is a very big part of it.
He's very much part of it, as is Peter Coe, who runs all my syndicates. Peter's been with me as long as Matt has.
Yeah.
They came roughly the same time. I think Peter came before. Peter approached me when I was in Northamptonshire, asked to come and work for me.
Yeah.
Peter used to run all Peter Harris's syndicates. He's an unbelievably major part of my life, because at the end of it, running syndicates is not an easy job.
No.
And I know modern technology has transformed. We have the Racing Managers, an app that everybody has, so you can communicate through that, and they get all the videos and the information about the horse. But he's the one who takes all the flack. They don't ring me, thankfully.
Yeah.
They ring him. So he's the agony aunt. And every yard needs an agony aunt. And he's the agony aunt for them. And then he would just say to me, "I think it'd be a good idea if you go so-and-so a ring." And they're not very happy at the moment. So I ring and they go, "Whoa!" But no, the future's all about keeping going and making it work. And Matt's got a golden opportunity to turn something in years to come to his advantage. Yeah,
and that's fantastic to hear. And talking about Peter, I remember watching Vindication win the Sodexo Gold Cup at Ascot that day, and for owners to be able to share a moment like that and be involved in a horse where the syndicates run for them, it's to be there in the winners' enclosure at Ascot. It's what it's all about, isn't it?
It is, and that must never change. That must never change. My biggest worry about the micro syndicate is now with so many people in it is a difficult one, because you're only a limited number of people who can go. We do syndicates with 10 people, so the chances are everybody can go.
Yeah.
But that's our way of doing it. And I'm not geared up for micro. I'm very happy to have micro syndicates, but I like to see that my owners can actually make a phone call and come and see their horse any day of the week.
Yeah.
We've been sitting here this morning and we've had 2 people in here who dropped things off. So
exactly, yeah. You got sandwiches on your desk.
Yeah, I got sandwiches on my desk.
Yeah. And just looking forward to the modern day now, horses coming back in. Obviously, ended last season on a real high with Chianti Classico. What's the big dream still to go? I mean, in your career, what would you still like to achieve?
Oh, I mean, to win a Grand National is one, but to win a Gold Cup would be really love to win. Winning at Cheltenham is great. There's no doubt about it. And last year was a weird one because it was quite quiet on the Tuesday. But we were the first English trainer to go and win when everybody thought it was going to be completely dominated by Willie Mullins. The only sad thing I can say was she was called Margot rather than Chianti Classico, because I've drunk an awful lot of Chianti Classico, which some of it is not very good.
Well, it's been great to chat to you, Kim, and I wish you all the best for the future and especially the season coming up. And yeah, keep in touch. Obviously, we were up here quite a lot, so yeah, really thanks for having us along today, and it's been great.
Pleasure.